Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I wanted to do a big review of all the films that I've seen in May, but that would be just too big, so I'm whittling it down to new horror and thrillers that I watched in May. The first film that I watched, I think it was April 30th. This is when it came out on VOD, and it is called Voyages, directed by Neil Berger, starring Lily Rose Depp, Sheridan, and Colin Farrell. And a huge part of why I wanted to watch the film was mainly just like the cast. There's actually been quite a few space movies that have come out this year. I don't know why 2021 is the year of the space film, but I was excited to see it. It looked really interesting. It looked quite different. It's basically about genetically engineered young people who are sent off into a mission into space where their future generations will land on the new planet and procreate. And so this is basically how they can sort of secure the survival of the human race. Okay, so obviously that premise sounds really interesting, but when you watch Voyages, you will realize that this is actually just Lord of the Flies in space. Like, there's nothing new. You know where the story's gonna go. You actually don't get that much space. I was really surprised. They go out into space and there's a couple shots and that's it, and I was really disappointed. I would have loved more of that. Honestly, there's not really much more that I can say about this film other than I was massively disappointed. I was so looking forward to it and it just pretty much was not good. Like, it was not good. I wouldn't really actually recommend that actually, but if you're interested to see it for the people that are in it, I understand. Give it a chance, watch it, but it's not good. One thing I will say, the score is beautiful, like beautiful, and there are some shots, there are some little moments that are interesting. That's what's so sad about it, is that it could have been great, but it just isn't. Next, we also have a space thriller, and this was Stowaway, directed by Joe Penna, and I actually don't think I'd realized that it was directed by him until the end, and when I saw that it kind of made a lot more sense. But if you haven't heard of Joe Penna, he directed a film called Arctic with Mads Mikkelsen, and I quite enjoyed that film. This film is a bit of a mixed bag. I really enjoyed a lot of the film. I would say that the third act, and especially that ending, just didn't go well with me. Like, I just didn't like it, so it did kind of ruin my experience of the film. But it has quite a good cast with Toni, Collette, and Anna Kendrick, Daniel Day Kim. It's quite good if you just want something light. Does have a bit of like a heaviness to it towards the end. But next is a film that I'd been anticipating for a really long time, and it is one of my, there's a few on this list that are on my most anticipated horror films, which is a video that I just recently did, and I will link it, so please watch that as well. But it is called In the Earth, directed by Ben Wheatley, and I was so excited to see it. It's weird because just before I was starting to see reviews and a lot of people were not liking it, so I was a bit worried that I was not gonna like it. But thankfully, we all have our own tastes, and I absolutely loved it. I loved it. It's like one of my favorite films of the year so far, and it's so much of what I love. So it's quite difficult to explain, and I honestly don't think that you need to know anything going into it. I didn't know anything going into it, but I will say that there is some folk horror vibes, some dreamy acid trip aesthetics, lots of bright flashing colors, and firstly, it's just visually beautiful. And I love that there was like a mix of a sort of like slasher vibe because they're in the woods and things kind of go awry. But I just love that it was this mix of a bunch of different subgenres in horror, and I could see how somebody could just not enjoy that, but for me it worked really well. And I really love the pagan folk horror theme running through it, and it was quite subtle but it was still there. And yeah, that's one of my favorite subgenres, and I probably will do a video on that one day. But yeah, I would highly recommend that you see In the Earth. It is really, really great. Next is Wrong Turn, and there's really nothing more to say other than I hated it. I thought it was terrible, and that's that. Like, I would not recommend you see it, but if you're a fan of the Wrong Turn films, maybe check it out. Next, I watched Those Who Wish Me Dead, directed and written, I think, by Taylor Sheridan, and this stars Angelina Jolie, and this is more of like a thriller, and I was really excited and looking forward to it. It was good. It was quite good and quite enjoyable, and it wasn't the best film I've ever seen, but it was like, you know what it's gonna be. And but I did think that the way that Taylor directed all of the scenes that had to do with the fire was really kind of smart, and Angelina is just like amazing as usual. So if it's a good movie, I would recommend it. Next, I watched The Woman in the Window, and I'm just still reeling from how bad that film was, and I cannot believe that Joe Wright directed it. I mean, he's not always made great films, but I love a lot of his period dramas that he's directed with Keira Knightley. They're some of my favorite films. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Like, it's terrible. It is terrible. And I just feel bad for Amy Adams. Like, we need to get her out of her flop era. Like, this is just like, she needs a new agent or something. Like, this was just terrible. And the script, oh my god, like everything about this was just, I would not recommend you see this. And then lastly, I saw Oxygen very recently, last night actually, and this is directed by Alexandre Aya, and I'm a huge fan of him. He's directed Crawl and High Tension, and I really love those movies, and The Hills Have Eyes as well, which is really good. And this stars Melanie Laurent, who is one of my favorite actresses. She's also a really great director. You should check out her film Breathe. But I just loved this film. It was so smart, so inventive. They obviously, I think, made it during the pandemic, and so there's sort of like a limit to how they can shoot, but it did not take away from the film at all. It is so smart, so original, and it is definitely worth your time. I definitely think that you will enjoy it. It is on Netflix. That was my little recap of horror and thrillers that I watched in May. So let me know which ones you liked and which ones you didn't. Thank you for watching. Bye.